Chapter 14. Ranofer's plunge into the crevice sent him half falling, half jumping, from one to another of the crude, wide-spaced steps. After a moment, he missed one altogether and simply tumbled, striking his knees and wildly waving his arms on every rough projection he passed. He landed at the bottom, feeling bruised, dazed, and as terrified of the inky blackness around him now as he was of the great winged thing from which he had fled. He got to his feet and stumbled about blindly, hands outstretched, until he located the opening of the passage he had guessed was there. It sloped gently downward as it led away into the unknown dark. As he hesitated, eyes stretched wide in a futile effort to see something, anything. A dim glow of light shone far ahead of him. Gaboo and Wenamon must have kindled a torch. That glow was its faint reflection on some distant curve of the passage wall. Ranofer fixed his eyes on it, licking his trembling lips. He could not stay here shivering and dreading. He must follow, or else climb back to the surface and be carried off to some unthinkable land of Kefs by that great winged thing. He was still weighing bad against worse when the dim glow ahead faded and disappeared. Setting his teeth hard, Ranofer started along the passage. It sloped gently at first, then more steeply, leading ever deeper into the earth, growing blacker and still blacker until Ranofer was seized by the conviction that he was moving along a slim bridge over vast empty space, and repeatedly clutched in panic at the walls while his bare toe fearfully explored the step ahead. The floor was strewn with sharp fragments that hurt his feet. The air was hot and close, and so dry it seemed to shrivel his very flesh. It was shriveling, he was sure of it. Was it from the breath of that great black creature still after him, or the deathly, withering wind of its wings? He moved faster, scrambling blindly forward, longing for another glimpse of that light. Once his head struck sharply against something hard and rough-edged, and he sank into a terrified heap, whispering prayers to the vengeful spirits and spells against them. He was too weak to run, too frightened to stay where he was. Stumbling to his feet, arms locked about his head, he bumped the same hard thing again and realized it was the ceiling of the passage, pressing so low that from here on he would have to crawl. He crawled, his teeth chattering, and his whole body shaking so uncontrollably that it felt as if it belonged to someone else. He had never felt so small, so alone, so outnumbered, as in this terrible black place, haunted by beings he could not see or hear or feel, but only knew they were there. Worse, every inch he moved forward took him nearer to an even more terrible place, the citadel of death itself, the dwelling of the outraged, departed one, whose mere sentries these other creatures were. Now and then he caught sight of the torch glow ahead and flung himself recklessly toward it, though the faint, far-off gleam only intensified the blackness and enclosed him. Any living human, thieves and murderers included, Gaboo included, would seem a friend and rescuer now. After what seemed an eternity, he realized that the blackness around him was no longer entirely black. It had turned to the lesser dark of night. Presently it became almost grayish, so that he could see faintly the hacked-out walls on either side. Obviously, the torch had stopped moving, and he was drawing closer to the light. There was a sudden sound of chipping, followed by the noise of falling plaster. Ranofer halted, his desire for Gaboo's companionship abruptly vanishing. Even the fear of bodiless devils gave way before the sudden clear picture of this all-too-solid one up ahead. Gaboo was still Gaboo, human or not, and he was at this moment breaking through the plastered wall of a tomb. Ranofer waited until all sounds had ceased and the torch glow moved on before he cautiously crept ahead. Around a bend in the passage, he was suddenly dazzled by a patch of golden light. He flung up his hand, blinking until his eyes grew accustomed to what seemed a brilliant glare, though it was only the torchlight, shining directly through an irregular hole in the wall. Even as his vision adjusted, the glare dimmed. The torch was being carried farther into the interior of the tomb. He could see that, now that, as he had expected, the opening ahead of him was jagged with broken plaster. He eyed it fearfully, rubbing his cold hands against his thighs. For the first time he wondered who the man had been that now lay buried here. Some great one, for the tomb was large, The torch had receded into what was apparently a second chamber, and the thieves' footsteps came echoing back to Ranofer eerily, as though in a vast space. His flesh crawled, and the little hairs prickled on the back of his neck as he edged slowly toward the hole in the wall. Shivering, he rose to his feet before it, peered fearfully in, and found himself staring into a pair of strange, glazed eyes not 2 paces from his own. With a gasp, he flung himself backward, eyes tight shut against the horror that was sure to strike him dead. At that same moment, a voice growled, "What was that?" "Ancient?" Haket said in a weary voice. "Perhaps he is not even in this valley." "Perhaps not," said the old man in a voice even wearier. "Perhaps he followed Goboo somewhere on a boat, or to the stone-cutting shop, or—" Haket sighed and did not bother to finish. "It is possible," said the ancient. They were leaning against a huge boulder near a heap of rubble that spoke silently of the entrance to a tomb somewhere nearby. They had investigated a dozen such rubble heaps, prowled and searched until they had located a few of the tomb entrances themselves, though all were well camouflaged behind rocks and piled-up sand. Not one had shown a sign of having been disturbed or even visited in years, and the few actual doors they had glimpsed after careful peering between the rocks had revealed the necropolis priest's seal unbroken upon the jamb. They had located this near one too, and it too had disappointed and discouraged them. It was beginning to seem useless to keep up a search so futile, in a place so vast. They had wandered far north of the rock pile from which they had seen the vulture rise. No doubt there were just as many tombs to the south of it. There were tombs all over the valley, dozens, perhaps hundreds of them. "Surely we would have caught sight of him before now, if he is here," Haket said, "unless he has—" He turned to the ancient with startled eyes. "Unless he has actually gone into a tomb." "If he has done that, I fear it is too late for any help of ours," the ancient said grimly. "Do you think he would have, ancient?" "Nay, surely not," the old man muttered. He moved away from the boulder and glanced around him uneasily. "This valley itself is bad enough, with a kept watching from behind every rock, as like as not to see what we are up to. I do not care overmuch for it myself." "Nor I," Haket agreed with feeling. "And to enter a tomb with those two for company, that would be worse by far. I cannot believe he would do it. Come, boy, let us go back to Thebes. Perhaps we will find him waiting." Haket nodded, but his nod carried no more conviction than did the ancient's voice. They started drearily back the way they had come, through the sand and glaring rocks, each one radiant with heat. Haket stumbled and put both hands up to shade his eyes a little from the blinding light. "Ancient," he said in a small and dismal voice, "how do we know that brother of his has not done something to him? Maybe hours ago, maybe even last night." "We do not know," said the ancient. He too shaded his one eye for a moment to locate the distant cleft in the hill that marked the path back to Thebes. Then he lowered his head and hobbled on. There was a silence that seemed as long as time itself to Ranofer, who lay in a tight ball, dizzy with fright, on the floor of the passage. Then he heard Goboo's voice in the second room, sounding unconcerned as ever. It was nothing at all, son of a jackal, son of a pig. You are afraid of your own shadow." "I tell you I heard a sound," the voice of Wenamon insisted. "There is no one here but us and the dead. Make haste with those boxes now." Slowly, uncertainly, Ranofer rose to his knees, then stood. No one here? But what was that face he had seen, trembling? He peered again through the opening and met the same pair of eyes. This time, though, he shrank back involuntarily. He realized that they did not move, did not live. They were inlaid glass of eyes of a life-size wooden statue, and he saw now that they had been partially smashed, as if from the blow of a dagger hilt. Goboo and Wenamon had wanted no gaze upon them as they went about their evil work, especially the gaze of this watchful Ushbati, placed here as a servant and guardian of the dead. Nervously, Ranofer examined the figure more closely, and his fear of its vengeance changed to an unexpected pity. It was the statue of a slim and lovely servant girl wearing a painted white dress and a painted gilt necklace, steadying a box on one shoulder and carrying a painted wooden duck by its feet in her other hand. Her expression was one of serenity and joy, and the sculptor who carved her had been a master. Now her clear, wide eyes were cloudy and blinded by the blow that had splintered them. Her beauty was marred and her usefulness as a watchful guardian ended. It was like seeing some innocent, happy creature lying murdered, victim of Gaboo's callous greed. Ranofer's gaze turned from her to move in wonder about the rest of the chamber, which was dimly illumined by the glow of the torch from the next room. As he looked, a strange emotion took possession of him. Beyond and around the graceful statue were articles of clothing, furniture, arranged as in a beautiful home. There were armchairs and beds of carved wood decorated with gold. There were alabaster honey jars, painted boxes resting on delicately wrought ivory legs. There was a wicker trunk ventilated by little slatted openings, through which the fragrance of the perfumed garments within escaped into the room. There were wine cups arranged on shelves. There were scent jars and jeweled collars and armbands. Everywhere was the gleam of gold. It was not the gold, however, that held Ranofer's gaze and drew him slowly through the jagged entrance to stand, silent and awed, within the precious habitation. It was the garlands of flowers, only a little withered, as if placed here in love and grief only yesterday, and the sight of a worn oaken staff leaning against the wall, of 2 pairs of sandals, a new and an old, of favorite joints of meat placed neatly in boxes as if for a journey. Whatever he had expected, it was not this intimate look of home, of a well-loved room to which its owner might at any moment return. Whatever horrors haunted the passage, they were not here in this quiet sanctuary. Who was the owner? Ranofer's eyes searched farther and halted in surprise. There were 2 owners. Slowly, soundlessly, he crossed the chamber to the pair of silver-inlaid coffins, on the lids of which were sculptured in gold the figures of their occupants, a man and a woman. They lay as if sleeping side by side, their folded hands eloquent of the same defenselessness trust that had caused them to order a sweet-faced servant girl as their only guardian. As Ranofer looked into their quiet, golden faces, the stealthy sounds of plundering in the next room became horrible to him. For the first time, he fully understood this crime. He straightened, all his fear gone, and in its place hot fury, those merciless and wicked ones, to break into this sacred place and steal the treasures meant to comfort this old couple through their 3,000 years. Whether rich gold or worn-out sandals, these things belonged to them. No living human had a right to set foot in this chamber, not even the son of Thutra, who meant no harm. Almost he could hear the helpless fluttering of these old ones' frightened paws. So strong was the sensation that he dropped to his knees in profound apology for his own intrusion. As he did so, he saw something else, a stack of wine jars just beyond one of the coffins. They were capped with linen and sealed with clay, and pressed into the clay was a mark as well known to Ranofer as it was to everyone else in Egypt. It was the personal seal of the great noble Ha, only 2 years dead, the beloved father of Queen Tai. Shocked to his very toes, Ranofer scrambled up and retreated a few respectful steps, involuntarily stretching out his hands toward the coffins in the gesture of homage. Here lay Ha and his cherished wife Twa, the parents of the Queen of Egypt. And here he stood, an insignificant nobody, daring to gaze into their faces. He was acutely, desperately embarrassed. He felt like a dusty urchin trespassing in a palace, which he was. Worse, at any moment, those thieves would be in here to wreck and to pillage, to tear the gold trim from chairs and chests, to snatch the jewel boxes, to break open the beautiful coffins, and even strip the wrappings from the royal mummies themselves in search of golden amulets. It must not happen. These old ones should have someone grand and fierce to protect them. They have only me, Ranofer thought. I must do something, anything. Go fetch help. He turned and started swiftly toward the entrance hole, too swiftly, for his elbow grazed a little inlaid table and tilted the alabaster vase upon it. He clutched at it wildly, but it fell, shattering on the stone floor with a crash that echoed like the very sound of doom. The small noises in the chamber beyond ceased instantly. Ranofer breathed a prayer to Osiris and flung himself behind the coffins, which was all he had time to do before the torch and Gaboo's murderous face appeared in the doorway. "Ast!" came Wenam's hiss. "I told you we were not alone." "We will be soon," Gaboo answered in tones that turned Ranofer cold. He could see their two shadows on the wall, black and clear-cut. Gaboo's bulky one, Wenamon's thin and vulture-shaped, behind it. The shadows moved, rippled in deadly silence along the wall, leaped crazily to the rough ceiling and down again as the two began methodically to search the room. The dancing black shapes advanced relentlessly toward the coffins, looming huge as giants as they came nearer. Ranofer's hand groped out blindly and closed on a small, heavy object that felt like a jeweled box. At that instant, Gaboo's rage-distorted face was thrust over the coffin. Ranofer lunged to his feet and hurled the box with all his strength. There was a glittering shower of gems as the box struck Gaboo full in the eyes, jarring the torch from his hand. He gave a hoarse cry and staggered backward into Wenamon, who began to scream and curse as he fought the flame that was licking upwards into his cloak. In that one instant of confusion, Ranofer saw his chance. He seized the nearest wine jar and aimed it straight at the blaze. There was a splattering crash, and the torch hissed out, plunging the chamber into darkness. With the reek of wine and scorched cloth rising strong about him, Ranofer leaped for the far wall, feeling frantically along it for the entrance hole. Behind him, the dark was hideous with yells and curses, with the sounds of splintering wood and jewelry crushed underfoot as the two thieves plunged this way and that over the wine-slippery floor in search of him. Where, in the name of all the gods, was the hole? His fingers met a jagged bit of plaster, and beside it, empty space. In an instant, he was through the hole and stumbling along the black passage, bent double under its crowded roof, banging and bumping into its rough-hewn walls, but running, flying away from the death behind him. The sounds of rage faded as he ran, grew fainter with every bend, then suddenly grew louder. The thieves had found the wall opening too, and were after him in the passage. He scrambled around a curve, almost fell, dashed on again, and brought up with a stunning impact against solid wall. Walls on three sides of him? Was he trapped? He wasted precious moments seeking a way around the obstruction. Then his hand touched a rough shelf of stone. A step! He had reached the bottom of the entrance shaft much sooner than he expected, for his headlong flight back had consumed far less time than his first cautious crawling journey. He clawed at the wall, found step after narrow step, and hoisted his trembling body up them one by one. As he put his weight on the last one, it crumbled under him. In a panic, he flung both arms over the top of the shaft, and for a terrible moment hung there. Then wriggling, straining, pushing, he was over the top and through the crevice in the rocks. The sunlight hit him like a blow. Half blinded and shaking all over, he could think only of that last crumbled step and what it could mean to him. The thieves might climb past by jumping and then wriggling as he had done, but they could not get out if the top of the shaft were solidly blocked. They would have nothing to stand on to shove away the stones. He could hear stumbling, rapid footsteps approaching the bottom of the shaft, and Gaboo's enraged voice bellowing his name, but already he was grabbing up rocks as fast as he could move, his eyes squinted tight against the glare of the day. He hurled a few into the shaft and felt a fierce joy at the roar of pain below and the thud of someone falling. Quickly, he wedged some larger stones into the crevice, then began to shove and strain at the biggest, a boulder 3 times the size of his head, which had originally blocked the entrance. It would not budge. He put his shoulder to it, dug his toes into the hot sands, and shoved with all his strength. It stirred a little, tilted. He heard more scrambling sounds below and gave one last desperate thrust. The boulder tipped and rolled across the opening. For a moment, he could do nothing but lean upon the boulder and gasp for breath. There was still space behind it, but he could push it no closer. Amon, willing, it would delay them a little while, but that was all. He turned and started running across the red wasteland of the valley in the direction of the Nile. After the closeness of the tomb, the hot, free wind of the desert poured over him like a breath of life itself, but he could take no joy in it. If only the stone had rolled closer, there would be time to plan, to act in safety. But there was no time. There was nothing but more and more danger. Gabu was strong as Set himself. Sooner or later, the stone would be tilting, moving, rolling free. Chapter 15. Haket and the Ancient had reached the path that led up to the cliffs. Tired, sweaty, and weighted with fear for their friend, they paused a moment to rest, then started with dragging feet up the stony trail. At the first bend, where the path crooked about on itself and led behind a jagged outcrop of rock, Haket stopped again to look out across the empty red expanse which had defeated them. One hopeless glance, and he turned to follow the old man. Then suddenly he turned back, squinted, shaded his eyes with cupped hands. An instant later he let out a yell of excitement. "Ancient! Ancient! Ancient! Look yonder!" As the old man whirled and hurried back to him, Haket grabbed his arm and pointed. "There, beyond that line of rocks, that looks like a crocodile. Isn't it someone running, isn't it?" "It is," said the Ancient. They stood motionless, peering toward the distant figure, which vanished behind boulders, reappeared briefly in clear stretches of sand, only to be hidden from them again. Presently, however, it was close enough for them to be certain it was a boy and not a man. "It's Ranofer, it must be!" Haket cried. He turned and plunged recklessly down the path, with the Ancient behind him. A moment later, he was running across the sand toward the place he had last seen the figure, shouting Ranofer's name and waving his arms like banners. At the second shout, the figure emerged from behind an outcrop, stared, then almost flew the remaining distance between them. "Haket! Haket!" Ranofer reached his friend and fell upon him. "How did you get here? What are you doing in this place? Oh, Ancient!" As the old man came hobbling up, Ranofer flung his arms around him and burst into tears. "Aye, young one," the Ancient groaned and hugged him hard. "We guessed you had come here. We've been searching and searching." "But where were you hiding?" Haket broke in. "What have you been doing? Look at you, all dirt and scratches." "I've been in the tomb after those cursed ones. They're still there. I've trapped them, but I doubt it will hold them long. I could not push the boulder tight enough. Oh, Ancient, it is the tomb of the Queen's father and mother, honored Hua and Ta." "You trapped the thieves, you say?" The Ancient pushed him away and seized his shoulders. "Trapped them where? Speak quickly." As coherently as he could, Ranofer panted out his story. "Do you see? The two of them dug that passage long ago. They've been biding their time, stealing from wreck, and breaking into other tombs, too. I found a goblet that proves it. It's in the scroll room at the shop this minute, but I can't find it. I can't find it anywhere." "Never mind the goblet. Where is this stone? I'll wager Haket and I together can make it move." "Aye, we'll guard the place while you fetch help." Haket's eyes were shining. He looked as if he had never been tired in his life. "Make haste, show us." "It is yonder," Ranofer pointed, then scrambled to the top of a massive boulder and beckoned Haket up beside him. "You can see it from here. Look, that pile of rocks with the slanted flat one balanced on top. Do you see it?" "Ancient, it is the place where that vulture flew up." "Vulture?" Ranofer gazed at him, wide-eyed, then with an expression so peculiar that Haket frowned and caught his arm. "What ails you? Take care, Ranofer, don't fall." "I won't. Vulture, well, no matter. I'm glad he flew. Otherwise I never would have known. Come, hurry. Did you note the way well? There is a crevice behind that rock pile with stones before it." "We'll find it," Haket said as they jumped to the ground. "Won't we, Ancient? You can depend on us." "Farewell, then, but be careful. Those two devils, they have knives, I think. Nay, I will come with you." "What use would that be? Go, fetch help." Haket gave him a shove and turned away. Reluctantly, Ranofer started toward the hill, then whirled back, stricken. "Aye, but where shall I go fetch it? Oh, mother of Aman! Everybody will be across the river watching the procession, and no one would listen anyway. It is the same as before." The others frowned, then came back to him. "They must listen," the Ancient said. "Tell them you have been into the tomb." "Tell who, and how can I get them to believe me? They will think I am spinning tales." "You brought nothing from the tomb, no proof?" "Nothing, nothing." "The goblet," Haket said. "If you showed the goblet." "I told you, I cannot find it. Perhaps it is not even there. Oh, if Za were at his house today, or Rek." "Nay, Rek is not. That I know, but Za might be," Haket exclaimed. "He is an old man, Ranofer. He might not have gone across the river." "I will try. It is all I can do. Farewell. Osiris guard you." "And you," the Ancient's voice came floating after him as he sped away. I should not leave them here with those two devils, Ranofer thought as he forced his tired legs over the sands and up into the hill trail. A glance back at that first bend in the path showed him their small figures hurrying along in the distance, straight for the rock pile. What if Gaboo had pushed that stone away already? What if they had to face him in that keft of a Wenamon as they crawled out of the shaft? They would never survive it, not an old man and a boy inexperienced at dodging blows. "Oh, I must go back, cried one part of Ranofer, but the rest of him said nay, go on. On he went, trying to forget the danger in which he had placed his dearest and only friends. Pain tore at his side, and his lungs felt as if they would burst by the time he reached the summit of the hill. He hurried past the place of the broken tree, past the shelf that had saved his life, and down the narrow, winding cleft up which he had crept so fearfully an hour ago. It seemed more like a year ago. He himself felt a different person from the boy who had started out this morning. That boy had been an infant, a know-nothing, a frightened fool, thinking he had real troubles. He had not even known what troubles were. Reflecting bitterly on that ignorant morning self, Ranofer emerged at last into the open sands at the foot of the cliffs. He stopped, leaned against the rocks, and gulped for breath. There before him lay Egypt, green and familiar, with the Nile glinting beyond the houses of the city of the dead. Za would not be home, he thought with hopeless certainty. He will be feasting with all the others. If there were a boat at the docks, but even if I found one and some paddles inside it and got across the river somehow. Aye, foolishness! I could not paddle a boat across the Nile now, not all alone. It is too high and swift, and even if I could, how would I find Za in the crowds? All Thebes is over there, and all half drunk by now, I'll wager. I will go to his house. I must try that at least. He set out across the strip of desert, running until the pain in his side returned, walking until it went away, then running again. At the outskirts of the city of the dead, he turned southward on the first street to the area of villas and gardens near the palace, then eastward toward the river until he recognized the street of Good Fortune curving off to his right. A few minutes later, he was trying Za's gate, rattling it frantically, when it resisted him, and finally pounding and pounding on it. He gave up at last, let his hands drop heavily to his sides, and stood with tears in his eyes, gazing at the gold sign worked into the grill and the purple vines spilling over it. He turned away and started aimlessly along the empty street. All he had accomplished was to place his friends in mortal danger, then run away and leave them. There was no one even to hear his tale, much less listen and believe. All these houses were as empty as the street, and the whole city was deserted. His gaze traveled sadly over the blank deaf walls and the closed gates and indifferent trees, and reached. He turned away and started aimlessly along the empty street. All he had accomplished was to place his friends in mortal danger, then run away and leave them. There was no one even to hear his tale, much less listen and believe. All these houses were as empty as the street. The whole city was deserted. His gaze traveled sadly over the blank, deaf walls, the closed gates and indifferent trees, and reached the palace looming far ahead at the street's end. There it suddenly riveted, the palace. It was not deserted. Not until midday, at the height of the festival, would the royal procession embark for Thebes in the temple of Ammon. Even as he broke into a trot, he knew it was hopeless, worse than hopeless. How could he get into the palace? The guards would never let him pass. He would never be allowed to tell what he knew. He would die at the gates, or else later when Gaboo escaped and found him. He did not turn back, his mind filled again with the memory of a quiet chamber deep under the earth, now wrecked and looted, with its helpless occupants still in danger of destruction. Renewed fury drove away the last shreds of his caution. He ran down the empty street, forbidding himself to think of anything but covering the distance he had to cover. At last he arrived, breathless, at the palace wall and glared at it. So I am to die, he thought furiously. So be it. I will die now at once and not wait for Gaboo's help. But first, I will yell out some of it. Discarding all thought of approaching the main gates, he ran in the opposite direction along the wall until he found a tall palm growing near it. After a moment's inspection, he leaped to its rough trunk and crawled up it like a cat, swayed precariously outward on a thick frond, and dropped to the top of the wall. Beneath him, inside the wall, he saw a courtyard edged with sheds and stables. There were 3 chariots glittering with gold, and a dozen grooms were beddecking horses with plumes and flowers for the coming procession. None of them looked up. Crouching, Ranofer crept along the top of the wall to the next courtyard. This one was lined with the stalls of the palace weavers and basket makers and potters and bakers, but there was no one in sight. After a moment's intent listening, Ranofer could hear no movement from inside the workshops. This was the place to enter. Swallowing, he hesitated, then dropped the palm-thatched roof of one of the stalls, and from there to the pavement. His heart was thundering so that he felt sure someone would hear it. With a quick glance around, he started across the open space toward a gate in the opposite wall, which seemed likely to bring him closer to the palace itself. Suddenly, a voice bellowed out behind him. "Hi! Halt there! Who is that? Stop, I say!" Without waiting to look around, Ranofer sprinted for the gate and tugged it open. Next instant, he had burst into an open-air kitchen, full of ovens and fresh-plucked fowl and the fragrance of new bread, and swarming with cooks and kitchen slaves. With a dismayed gasp, he plunged straight through them, ignoring their startled cries and outstretched hands, while the voice behind him bellowed, "Catch him! Catch him!" A dozen yelling cooks were after him by the time he had clambered up a vine on the nearest wall of the courtyard, flung his feet over, and landed running in the kitchen garden on the other side. As his pursuers burst through a gate behind him, he fled up a red gravel path gravel path between rows of onions and beans into a grape arbor, and presently out the other end. He was panting, stumbling, and by now utterly confused. The angry cries seemed to come from everywhere, and he had lost all sense of direction. He could see no other wall to climb, no way out, no place to hide. He did not know which way the palace was, which way the street he had come from. He found himself confronted suddenly by a thick hedge, and swerved away from it, only to see a burly gardener emerge into the path ahead and run straight toward him. Whirling, Ranofer plunged into the hedge. It was dense and tough. By the time he had managed to wriggle through it, his flesh was scratched and torn, and his shanty in rags. Exhausted, he tumbled onto the velvet grass on the other side and tried to scramble up. At once, he was pinned, hand and foot. "Now then, you river scum," panted a voice beside him. The gardener and a shaggy-headed slave were holding him fast, glaring down at him. Beyond them, he caught a glimpse of lawns and shade trees, a blue pool with lotus blossoms, a pavilion set among flower beds, and a group of people staring in his direction. One of them, a soldier with a drawn sword, had started toward him. He struggled helplessly, tried to speak, but could only gulp for breath. "Great Bast's whiskers! It's only a boy," the slave said disgustedly. "Say something, you! What are you doing in the royal grounds?" "The tomb," Ranofer croaked. "I must warn Queen Tai." A heavy hand slammed across his face. "Insolent!" the gardener roared. "Who are you to speak the name of the sun's daughter?" "I must warn her, I tell you. I saw them. I followed." "Hathor's mercy, he's mad!" the slave exclaimed, backing away a little, though without loosening his grip on Ranofer's arm and making a gesture to ward off the evil eye. I'm not! Ranofer struggled frantically, his eyes on the drawn sword of the approaching soldier and his mind full of that desecrated underground chamber. "May Set destroy you!" he screamed at his captors. "The queen herself will, unless you listen to me. The tomb is plundered." "Silence!" The soldier arrived, brandishing his curved sword at all 3 of them. "Out of here, riffraff! How dare you set foot in the queen's own pleasure garden?" "We followed this urchin," cried the slave, ducking away from the sword. "It is a mad boy who came over the wall and through the courtyards babbling of tombs and the queen." "Silence! Return to your duties, you! Stay!" The soldier yanked Ranofer to one side and waved the others out of sight and into the kitchen garden. "Now then, I'll deal with you." He made a swift, expert movement, and Ranofer found himself stumbling along a path with one arm twisted behind him. It did not hurt until he tried to break away, then pain like fire shot from one wrist to shoulder. He rapidly decided not to struggle. "Please, Captain, Honored General," he began. "Silence!" The fire shot up his arm again. There was nothing to do but keep still and go where he was taken, which was, he realized, to the pool and the group of people gathered near it, who were watching his approach. At a respectful distance from them, the soldier halted and murmured in quite a new voice, "1,000 pardons, Excellency. I will remove this blemish from your sight with all haste. It is but a mad boy who—" During the brief apologetic narrative, Ranofer managed to twist into a position where he could study these new people. Foremost among them was a tall, cold-faced man with a massive gold chain about his neck. Behind him clustered a few scandalized palace servants, a gardener to whom the Excellency had evidently been issuing instructions, and a strange little man no more than 4 foot high, wearing a silver headcloth and 2 enormous rings of silver dragging at his earlobes. Ranofer forced his eyes away from this astounding little personage and back to the tall man, who he guessed must be the palace overseer. "Excellency, listen to me, I pray you," he begged, cutting through the soldier's mumblings. "There are robbers this very minute in the sacred tomb of the—" He broke off with a cry as the soldier gave a sharp jerk to his arm, snapping, "Hold your tongue, scum!" "Very well, Captain, remove him," the overseer said indifferently. The Great One turned away, and Ranofer sagged with discouragement in the soldier's grasp. "In the name of Aman," he pled, "in the name of the Queen," but already he was being marched relentlessly across the grass toward a wooden gate and oblivion. Then a curious piping voice behind him called, "Captain, wait!" And the dwarf in the silver headcloth came pattering up on its stubby legs. "Free his arms! I want to look at him," the little man ordered in a tone fully as haughty as the overseer's. Loosed at once, Ranofer straightened dazedly, rubbing his numbed arm and staring at his deliverer. Could this strange little man be someone of importance? "Live forever, master," the boy faltered. The dwarf thrust forward his head with a movement that set the huge earrings bobbing. "Who are you, mad one?" he demanded. "Master, I am Ranofer, the son of Thutmose the goldsmith, and indeed, I am not mad. Silence! Do you know who I am?" "Nay, master." "Tell him, Captain." "His Excellency is Ranofer of Abydos, favorite pet of her sublime majesty, the daughter of the sun, the divine consort T. May she live forever." The soldier rattled off stiffly. Ranofer glanced at him and saw that his face had turned purple with rage. Obviously, he did not like taking orders from a person half his size. Just as obviously, Ranofer, whose name meant tall and beautiful, enjoyed giving them enormously. He smiled like a cat with a particularly tasty mouse, strutted up and down a time or two to make his earrings sway gaudily, then waved an arrogant and much bejeweled hand. "Dismissed, Captain," he piped. "I will take the charge of the prisoner." "But your Excellency," the soldier roared. "Dismissed," the dwarf roared back at him. The soldier turned on his heel and stalked through the wooden gate. Instantly, Ranofer seized Ranofer's wrist. "Now speak, quickly. What is this babble of tombs and thieves?" Dizzy with sudden hope, the boy sank to his knees. "Master," he stammered, He forced himself to be coherent. "There are robbers in the tomb of the royal parents. I saw them enter. I followed, and they had smashed the eyes of the guardian statue, and they were stealing the gold from the 2 old ones who lay there so quiet." "Fool," the dwarf gave his wrist a yank. "You did not see these things. You babble." I swear it. Desperately, Ranofer poured out the story. How he had knocked over the vase, and they had searched for him. How he had flung the box, and the wine jar, and escaped and rolled the stone over the crevice. "But, master, I could not push it tight, and they will come out of there. I left 2 friends to guard the place, but one is an old man, and the other only a boy like me, and I do not know if they can keep the stone in place. Perhaps those cursed ones have killed them by now." Another yank at his wrist cut off the rest. "What cursed ones? Who are these robbers? Come, are you not making the whole tale up? You do not know their names. I'll wager my earrings." "I do. They are Wenamon the mason and Gabu the stonecutter. I know them well, too well," added Ranofer bitterly. "Gabu is my half-brother. I live in his house and eat his bread." The dwarf's expression underwent a change. He examined Ranofer's face minutely for a moment, then turned and started along the gravelled path, pulling Ranofer after him with surprising strength. We will see, he muttered as he flung open the gate. If you are lying to me. I am not lying, master. Joy rushed through Ranofer. He wanted to thank this strange little man, to heap praises upon him, but qua Nefar was pattering along so fast he had scarcely breath enough to keep up. They hurried through a flowery arbor, down another walk, and up a flight of stairs that climbed the side of a huge building. The palace, Ranofer thought. I am going into the palace of Pharaoh. The door at the top of the stair opened into a vast hallway down which the dwarf pulled him without slackening his rapid, half-trotting walk. Ranofer caught confused glimpses of shining walls and pavements painted in glowing colors. Then suddenly he was dragged through a doorway and given a final shove. Stay here, the dwarf hissed fiercely and vanished into the hall.